What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero, because World War III is a really bad idea. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It's Wednesday, May 3rd, 2017, hump day, middle of the weekday, starting that long, slow glide down to Pauhana Friday. A lot of crazy stuff going on here today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling our dials, keeping us out of trouble, ready to answer the phone when you call on in. And the good news on the computer level out here is that Spectrum is still slow, but not as slow as they were yesterday, so we're a little closer to being back to normal. But looking at the down detector and reading all the complaints, I think Spectrum has become an illustration of why monopolies are not necessarily a good thing, because the price will go up and the quality will go down, and people are left without any kind of a choice in terms of where they're going to go with what they're doing. Okay, so getting on into the news here. Interestingly enough, Director James Comey is basically being grilled by the White House regarding his giving Hillary Clinton a get-out-of-jail-free card. And basically, Comey is saying he doesn't regret his decision. He thinks it was the right decision to make. He has no regrets. But spent most of his time screaming about Russian interference and terror and all this other stuff. A lot of people are very surprised that Trey Gowdy seemed to be coming to Comey's defense, saying that Comey is stable and trustworthy. And a lot of people are scratching their heads about that one. But again, if I am correct as to what was really going on behind the scenes with that private email server, then everybody's going to keep that scandal under wraps, because that is a scandal that could bring down the entire government. And for those of you who are just joining our audience more recently, what we're talking about is a repeat of the 1994 Chinagate scandal, which was a secrets for campaign cash scandal. They evaded investigation back then. And it's a legitimate question, given that the hacker, Guccifer, who got into Hillary Clinton's private server, reported 10 other foreign IPs wandering around all the files. It is a reasonable question to ask if Hillary Clinton was repeating that Chinagate scandal, selling U.S. secrets to foreign interests, using the email server to deliver the goods, and her so-called charitable foundation to collect and launder the money. And it is a legitimate question, and it needs to be asked, and it deserves an answer. But again, in Washington, D.C. politics, there are two kinds of secrets. There are the little secrets that can be used as weapons against each other, like Anthony Weiner and his problem. Then there are the great secrets, the ones that would bring the entire government down. The JFK assassination, the truth behind 9/11, the truth behind TWA 800, and so forth and so on. And this has all the earmarks of a great secret. Even people who do not like Hillary Clinton are working very hard to keep the lid on this. Now, Comey went on to say that he was never an anonymous source to the media on the investigations into Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, and he certainly did not authorize anybody else to do it. You know, we're all sweetness and light over here. And again, interspersed with Russia hacked the election, Russia hacked the election. The intelligence community agrees Russia hacked the election. Actually, they don't, but he just said that for the TV cameras. More terror is coming if you don't allow the FBI to continue doing what it's doing, and the threat is coming on. Okay, so let me just do something here real quick. Now, Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump had a phone call. And apparently Putin is also calling Erdogan over there in Syria, trying to calm things down. He's talking de-escalation. Now, what Putin may actually be doing is reading Erdogan and Trump the Riot Act and saying, this goes no further. And they've got the muscle to back it up. So we'll see where that's going. But as you know, Donald Trump is now saying he's ready to meet Kim Jong-un And, of course, the war hawks are going ballistic. Hillary Clinton is saying, he's doing this the wrong way. We don't talk, we bomb. Same thing with John McCain. All right, we're going to go ahead and take a phone call. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I wondered, have you seen Mike Whitney's new article in Counterpunch regarding this whole North Korea issue?
It doesn't ring a bell, not by the author name. What was the headline? What was the gist of it all?
Well, basically, it was from today's Counterpunch, and he argues that this whole North Korea story is a distraction, meant to distract people away from a U.S. Jordanian invasion of Syria from the south, drive up to Deir ez-Zor, the oil-rich area, and the North Korean issue basically accomplished two things that they wanted: more money for the military-industrial complex and to get that bad anti-missile defense installed, which they've achieved.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I have a similar article that came out of Press TV from E. Michael Jones, saying basically essentially the same thing, although his take is more a case of a distraction from the domestic problems and the failure to keep his promises to his supporters, the flip-flop on all the agendas. So
right. Well, yeah, I've seen that as well, but I think Whitney is definitely on to something. I agree with his assessment.
Again, I'm hoping that Putin has drawn a line in Syria's case in the sand, in Korea's case the jungle, and said, this has gone on far enough. A lot of people are dying. It's doomed to fail anyway. Let's just back on off and try and calm things down. And again, Putin seems to be the only adult in the room right now.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. Do a quick shout-out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining our network. Now, China has issued a warning to all of their citizens currently in North Korea to leave in advance of a possible attack by the United States. Because as we have seen in recent history, the United States isn't really very careful about what it's targeting. And a lot of innocent people get killed, and China wants their citizens back across the border into China. There's another article out here saying that North Korea looks to be gearing up for more sub-launched missile tests, and this is based on satellite images which show the construction on a second submersible platform. Now, what this platform does, it is basically a framework onto which they will put a missile launching tube, and then it actually will submerge below the water in order to test fire a sub-launched missile. They've already got one. They've been using it. If you remember that video of Kim Jong-un with the rocket rising up out of the water behind him, that's that platform. They're building a second one, which does seem to imply either the first one is worn out or they are going to accelerate that development. So we'll see what's happening there. Apparently there are other indications that yet another whale submarine, the Gore, may be about to be launched as well. And again, North Korea is not the threat here. North Korea merely wants to deter the United States from attacking, and the saber rattling is still going on. We just put up an article at whatreallyhappened.com where they're announcing that commandos are ready to infiltrate North Korea and destroy the ballistic missile and nuclear weapon sites. Well, ballistic missile sites, yeah, they're pretty much fixed. North Korea could have some mobile launch ballistic missiles like Russia and China do. But as far as the nuclear weapons, that's a real gamble betting that you know where every single nuclear weapon is. And I don't think that's necessarily a solid fact at this point. Meanwhile, even as the United States screams about North Korea's weapons test, the United States fired off another nuclear-capable Minuteman III last night. And they're out there flexing their muscle and saying, see, we've got weapons. And basically the attitude coming out of the White House is, we can test our weapons, but you can't test your weapons. Nya, 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 nya. What are you going to do about it? Now, obviously, when you're developing a new weapon, even a defensive weapon, you are going to have to test it to make sure it's actually going to work. Less so here in the United States if you've seen the Pentagon War. But you want to make sure that rocket is going to go in the direction it's intended. And so it's actually wise and prudent for North Korea to be testing their missiles, or they're going to wind up like Great Britain had that huge embarrassment not too long ago, where they launched a Trident missile test, unarmed, and it flew entirely in the wrong direction. It was actually headed toward the United States. Now, getting down to the gist of what this is all about. Editorial over in Russia Today. North Korea's true crime, it's not completely dominated by the United States. And that really is what it's all about. Look at all these invasions, regime changes, drone striking. It's basically recolonization of these countries by Washington, D.C. for the benefit of large corporations and some very rich people who want to be richer. Now, again, in response to that phone call, article coming out of Press TV, analyst E. Michael Jones is saying that Trump is using the standoff with North Korea to distract his domestic political opponents. I'm not sure how well that's working, because I'm certainly seeing a big hue and cry over his immigration policy, over the health care reform, over the emergency budget. I don't think it's really worked to call the sharks off that are swimming around the White House right now. Very alarming article coming out of Activist Post, and we mentioned this a few days ago. This is confirmation. There are now new developments in Syria which seem to be forecasting another false flag chemical weapons attack to be blamed on Bashar al-Assad. Fars News Agency and a number of independent journalists on the ground inside Syria are reporting movement of the notorious terrorist support group and propaganda outfit known as the White Helmets that signals the possibility of such an event taking place in the near future. Now, that would dovetail with our caller's suggestion that there's going to be an invasion of Syria from the Jordanian border. And we know they're going to use a false flag because Syria just wants to take back control of their own country. And the U.S. warhawks want to go on in because Syria is the last stepping stone before the much drooled over war with Iran that they want and you will pay for and your children will die in. Story out of Global Research up in Canada. The real defenders of democracy are these countries being attacked by the U.S., like Syria. And the war is against the international despotism of Wall Street. It's all about the money, colonization, wealth. All wars are bankers' wars, but you're never going to see the bankers themselves or their families actually fight and die in them. That's what you people are for. You serfs, you plebes. That's what we're going to use you up doing. There's too many of you anyway, so we're going to send you off to war and make ourselves richer in the process here. Now, antiwar.com is reporting that Saudi Arabia and their coalition appears to be on the verge of attacking one of the major ports in Yemen, Hodeidah, and seizing control of it, which would only enforce the starvation regime, the blockade on Yemen, even worse. And it's already turned into a humanitarian disaster. Story coming out of anti-war again. Saudi land push in Yemen could cause heavy casualties. This is Saudi Defense Minister and Deputy Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And he's out there saying this invasion is to restore the former President Abd Rabbu Mansur Hadi to power. Hadi was a U.S. puppet. When the U.S. intervened and they kicked him out, or they kicked out the former ruler, they put this guy in. The people of Yemen don't want him. Salman's just admitting what this war is all about, slapping down the people of Yemen and get them to love their U.S.-approved junta. Now, veteran aid expert John Egeland is warning today, following a visit to Yemen, that they are on the verge of what he calls a biblical catastrophe, a biblical famine, and the children are starving to death over there. You never see that on the corporate media. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, Michael, about this border wall, the estimated cost is between, $12 and $15 billion. You know, Republicans and this president aren't very good at math. Approximately, $100 billion is spent per year on the illegal immigration problem. So if you do the math, just pull it out of your own pocket and get it built. You're going to save $85 billion per year. I mean, with all this haggling about who's going to build it, build the damn thing and save yourself $85 billion per year on this illegal issue.
Well, the point here isn't the money and the cost. The point here is the New World Order attempting to blur all of the ethnical, racial groups on Earth into one common lump to undermine our sense of identity, our sense of self and history, to make it easier to control us. That's what's on the line here. And they're willing to spend the money to ship refugees and immigrants all over the country and to give them handouts and subsidies to support that globalist agenda. And they are opposed to anything that might impede that progress. In fact, there's a new announcement out of Brussels. When we get down to that, this is going to be a real alarm bell ringer. The globalists have not given up on trying to blur us all together, so there are no more Americans and no more Frenchmen and no more... There is simply the workers, the proletariat. That's it. The Eloi.
Well, we had no problem sending over $34 billion to Israel. I mean, dig down, get the money, get it built, and stop this globalist agenda. Just stop it.
I agree. I absolutely agree. And again, I'm not really convinced a wall is all that necessary. All we have to do is enforce the current immigration laws and cut off the financial incentives for the illegals to come here. No more free things, no more jobs. If you come here, you're going to starve in the streets of the United States of America. And already we're seeing a decline in people coming across that border because they think that stuff is coming. And in any event, if we really want to barricade there, I still think it's cheaper to put crocodiles in the Rio Grande.
I agree. Now, isn't the law actually says right now the current fine for each violation, for hiring violation of illegal, is $10,000 per violation, correct?
It's something like that. It's all in Title VIII. Even giving aid and comfort to an illegal immigrant can get you 5 years in prison per count, or if you financially profit from it, like you're a human trafficker, or you're the factory owner, you can get 10 years in prison per count. So when you look at all these mayors and governors who are out there saying we refuse to enforce the immigration law, they're committing all of these thousands of counts of violations of Title VIII, and they should be basically thrown in prison.
Agreed. Hey, thank you, Michael.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Now, interestingly enough, over in the Middle East, somebody did a poll of the young Arab population, and they are very strongly turning away from the United States and pivoting toward Russia. They see Russia as a happening country, and it's because, first of all, the U.S. is making war on all these Muslim countries. The U.S. is seen as anti-Muslim because of all the propaganda that's been coming out in the corporate media. And, of course, unquestioning U.S. support for Israel's aggressions against the Palestinians is a big turnoff. So, in the case of our relations with Israel, we're being penny wise and pound foolish. We're making Israel happy, but we're driving more and more regions of the world into the Russian sphere of influence. Now, Iran has gotten out there and made a wonderful suggestion, which is going to go absolutely nowhere. A senior Iranian foreign minister official is saying it's time for the international community to force Israel to join the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and allow inspections by the International Atomic Energy Agency. And, of course, Israel say, we're not admitting we have nuclear weapons, and even though there's paperwork from the former government of South Africa that Israel was selling them, trying to sell them a nuclear weapon. And remember, as long as Israel has nuclear weapon technology and refuses to sign the NNPT, every single penny of your money sent to Israel by the U.S. government is a criminal act under United States law. We're going to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we're talking about Iran is now calling on the international community to apply pressure to Israel to basically sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty and allow the IAEA to make sure that Israel is not, in fact, selling nuclear weapons to other countries under the table, as they were caught trying to do to the former government of South Africa. It doesn't make any, I mean, the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty makes absolutely no sense if there are nuclear nations that will not sign it, and Israel is one of them. But given Israel's history of belligerence, it is an issue. And I think all the nuclear nations ought to sign the NNPT and allow IAEA inspections to make sure that that very dangerous fissionable material is tracked globally, and we know where the problems are. But we do know Israel has nuclear weapons. They were trying to get them all the way back when John F. Kennedy was president. We know that their first generation nuclear weapons were built around weapons-grade uranium smuggled out of the United States of America from a company called NUMEC. Now, under the Symington Amendment to the Foreign Appropriations Act and under the Glenn Act, it is illegal for the United States government to send any of your money to any nation that has nuclear weapons technology and refuses to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty or allow IAEA inspections. Just keep that in mind when this whole nuclear debate moves forward. The U.S. government is breaking United States law with these billions and billions of dollars being showered all over Israel. By the way, do you remember that individual who was caught behind all of these telephone threats to Jewish community centers here in the United States and other countries as well? Nice Jewish boy, and they're trying to excuse it, saying, oh, well, he's autistic, he's this, he's that. Then they found out he had a huge Bitcoin account with a lot of money in it. The United States, understandably, would like this individual to have their day in court. Israel is refusing U.S. extradition request for this person who made all these phone threats. Imagine my shock here. Now then, remember Eisenhower and his farewell address, and he warned about the military-industrial complex. And by the way, if you're not familiar with Eisenhower, and you would have to be my age and older to really remember him, it's worth going back on YouTube and hunting down some of his speeches, such as the farewell address about the military-industrial complex, and another one he made called the Cross of Iron speech. Because President Eisenhower, as Supreme Allied Commander of the forces in Europe in World War II, he saw war up close and personal. And he was one of the most anti-war presidents this country ever had because of that experience. It wasn't just movies on a screen or TV shows or computer games. He'd seen the reality. And he was opposed to more war and to the power of it. So on that same theme over at Blacklisted News, they've got an article about the power in military black budgets. And they're talking about these top 5 military contractors, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, and Raytheon, and the absolutely amazing, horrifying volumes of money just poured all over them for the development of new weapons, new machinery of death. And if you look at the U.S. military budget, it's larger than the defense budgets of the next 25 countries, 24 of whom are supposed to be friends. And there is so much waste, so much poor quality coming out of all that money because it's a money-making scam is really what it is. And Eisenhower said that's what it was going to be. It was all about the money and the power. Now, on the assumption that Russia's electronic jamming isn't the reason why so many of those cruise missiles missed that Syrian airfield, that's pretty poor performance for such an expensive weapon. Actually, come to think of it, if Russia did knock them off course, it's still poor performance for a very expensive weapon. We'll be right back after these commercials. Aloha America, welcome back to the show, and some of our listeners just sent me that Counterpunch article by Mike Whitney in which he is postulating that all the attention is being put on Korea as a distraction for a coming blitzkrieg attack into Syria from Jordan, probably justified with a new false flag gas attack reportedly being set up by the White Helmets. It's almost like they don't even care anymore if we know they're lying to start the war. They're just going to go through the motions and get the war that they want. They want it, you will pay for it, your kids will die in it. That's the way they think it ought to be here. Now then, getting on over to Hillary Clinton, article out of Investment Watch blog. Hillary Clinton still can't comprehend her devastating loss to Donald Trump. She's still in denial, and apparently on a recent interview on CNN is still out there saying it was all due to FBI Director Jim Comey's meddling. And Donald Trump responded to that, saying that Comey was the best thing that ever happened to Hillary because he gave her that free pass on all of her felony Title 18 violations. And Hillary attacking Comey shows tremendous ingratitude. And I'd like to remind everybody that had Hillary been playing by the rules all along, there wouldn't have been an FBI investigation. Hillary is a perfect example of this mindset of which there's way too much in our political class of, it's okay for me to do whatever I want, just don't you talk about it. Now, Piers Morgan is out there saying Hillary did not lose because of Vladimir Putin or Comey or misogynist men. She lost because she ran an arrogant, insulting, elitist campaign, and if Democrats do not own up to that, they're going to lose the next election as well. And that's fairly accurate. The DNC pretty much discredited itself in this last election, and it's actually getting worse because down in Florida, there is a lawsuit against the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz by the Bernie Sanders supporters claiming that their financial support for Bernie Sanders was basically fraudulently obtained because of the DNC's actions to throw the nomination to Hillary Clinton. They donated money to the DNC to support Bernie Sanders, not Hillary Clinton. They're feeling they're defrauded. They may have a legitimate case. The courts may come on back and say that, yes, all these donors who donated to support Bernie Sanders may be owed a refund by the DNC. And the DNC's lawyer, Bruce Spiva, is up there saying it's perfectly legal for us to pick our own candidates in the back room. In other words, he's saying it's legal to rig the primaries. Yeah, the voters feel involved because they went to the primaries, but really it's up to us. He's paraphrasing Stalin, who said it's only important people know there was an election. They're not going to decide anything. The people who count the election will decide it. It's all a show. It's all a theater presentation. Now, there's another new analysis that's come on out from Fix This Nation, where people are really seriously looking at why the anointed Empress Hillary I came up short. And there's a lot of overlapping factors. Awareness of the Clintons' past crimes and corruptions, their links to CIA drug smuggling, the obvious health issues. But now that they're actually analyzing the data from the election, they have already come on out and said Donald Trump was able to mobilize his base, and Hillary was not. And we already saw that with the photos of Donald Trump's rallies. He was going to sports stadiums, and it was still standing room only, and Hillary was in these little tiny rooms, and they'd be 30, 40 people, and she'd put her own staffers in there to make the crowd look a little bit bigger. That should have been the giveaway that she was in trouble. She was relying too much on election rigging and this software tool, Aiea, that was making all the political decisions for the campaign. And they lost connection with the base, and that's why the base didn't respond. According to a new analysis, one of the big problems Hillary was dealing with was Barack Obama's voters. People who voted for Barack Obama switched parties and voted for Donald Trump. Not that Trump has not been a tremendous disappointment to us all. Judicial Watch is releasing a new batch of Clinton emails. They have found more classified information. And more indications of Clinton Foundation pay to play. If you want to talk to the Secretary of State, there better be a receipt for a donation in your hand. So that is now moving forward as well. I bet you won't see that one on the corporate media. I am absolutely convinced there's a big, ugly secret behind that email server that everybody has agreed has to stay hidden. Not because they like Hillary Clinton, but because they don't want to lose their own job here. And they're still out there with this Russian meddling in the election. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper and former Representative Michael J. Rogers were at the John F. Kennedy Jr. Forum Tuesday saying, oh yeah, absolutely there's meddling. Well, look, first of all, look at how often the U.S. meddles in foreign elections, at least 80 that we know of. Obama's over there in France trying to influence that election away from Marine Le Pen. It's an amazing double standard. Hypocrisy on display. It's okay for us to meddle in your elections. We're the United States of America, the moral leader of the world, but don't you dare meddle in ours. And again, you need to remember that all of the election fraud that has been documented so far favored Hillary Clinton. And the Russia bashing is starting to get ridiculous. If at first you don't succeed, lie again, and if the last lie didn't work, come up with something even more outrageous. That's the theory behind the big lie propaganda tactic that Hitler warned everybody about in Mein Kampf. People will fall victim to a really big lie. It's so shocking that they won't stop and think, boy, could this even be true? So, we have this article that came out of the Express over in Great Britain, where apparently a volunteer investigator, Andrei Milny, is claiming Russian President Vladimir Putin knows exactly where the wreckage of missing Malaysian Airlines Flight 370 is. And she is saying that the plane landed in the Bay of Bengal, and Putin knew where it was all along because of Russian satellites. It's rather absurd. Why would Putin keep that secret? Another one. This one is way out there. This is at IntelliHub. A former Russian colonel and defense ministry spokesman, Viktor Baranets, is claiming that even as I speak, the Russian military is planting sleeper mole nuclear weapons along the U.S. coastlines that are built to burrow their way down into the seafloor undetected in order to trigger tsunamis on command. I mean, that is really out there. Somebody gave this guy a huge amount of money to come up with this. Now, if somebody wanted to trigger a tsunami on the eastern seaboard, it's only going to take one nuclear weapon, and you don't have to get anywhere near the United States. And I'm talking about that Cumbra Vieja volcano over there in the Canary Islands, where the western flank has already started slipping. Put a nuke under there and throw the western side of that mountain into the ocean, you will have a tsunami all over the place. But I mean, this kind of thing, hidden nukes along our coast to trigger tsunamis. That's really out there. Now, apparently down in Florida, there's a federal investigation into Burlington College involving some misappropriations of money, bank loans, and unfortunately, it's tangled up with former Burlington College President Jane O'Meara Sanders, who is the wife of Bernie Sanders. And it's amazing to see the enthusiasm the feds have to go after her while still looking the other way anytime Hillary Clinton walks by. Wanted to point out that little compare and contrast exercise for you to see here. Article coming out of Washington's blog, liberals are just as irrational and close-minded as conservatives. Now, the liberal self-image is that they are superior, that they are tolerant, that they are willing to look at the world as it could be. But the reality is, a study published in the Journal of Experimental Social Psychology concluded that conservatives and liberals are equally averse to listening to opposing viewpoints on the hot-button issues, such as same-sex marriage. and it was a meta-analysis of 41 different studies published on the Social Science Research Network, reached a similar conclusion. There's no difference between conservatives and liberals in terms of flexibility and willingness to listen to the other side. Now, this brings me to a book. And we linked from whatreallyhappened.com to its Amazon page. And this is an unpaid plug. It's called Being in Time. It's by Gilad Atzmon. It formed the core of the talk they had in New York last Sunday. And he was kind enough to send me one of these. I'm not all the way through it, but I have to tell you, this is one of the best written, most insightful books about current events that I've read in a very long time. And interestingly enough, there's a lot of overlapping themes, but he comes on out and says one area in which you need to view liberals and conservatives as being different. Liberals are caught up in what they imagine the world could be and believe that that's where they're going, whereas conservatives are trying to deal with the world as it actually is right now, this moment. And from that difference in perspective comes a lot of the conflict. Liberalism, of course, is itself founded on an intellectual fraud. Margaret Mead's Coming of Age in Samoa. And liberals hold it as an article of faith that if they can change the environment, they will change the minds of people. Even though they continue to fail time and time and time again, nobody has the courage to go on back and re-examine the prime theorem behind it all. But it's a very, very good book, and I recommend it very, very highly, and you can get it at Amazon. Rachel Maddow is out there on a tear regarding Donald Trump's recent comments about the corporate media. And she's out there saying Trump wants to kill us, meaning metaphorically wants to kill the corporate media. It's a dangerous time for the First Amendment. Now, the issue here is that Donald Trump wants to strengthen the libel laws so that if the media unfairly smears you, you can seek recourse in the courts. Now, what Rachel Maddow and the corporate media are concerned about is a big part of their business is smearing people. Political opponents, foreign leaders, and so forth, and they want to go on being able to do that. And it's kind of strange for them to go back and say that this is a First Amendment issue, because it isn't. The First Amendment is there to protect the truth, not to protect lies and liars. But that's what the whole core of this argument is really all about. The corporate media they've learned nothing from their past embarrassments. They want to go on doing what they do, which is being paid handsome sums of money to be very good liars to the American people in the world. Now, some people in the media are starting to get it. Jake Tapper took part in a panel at the National Press Club last Friday. And he said, yeah, it's time to acknowledge the corporate media bears at least part of the blame that the public doesn't trust them. It's not the fault of the Russian propaganda arms. He says, yeah, there have been a number of scandals in the past decades where people in the corporate media were not telling the truth. They're at least acknowledging this is a big part of the problem, and that really is it. We've caught them lying, we've exposed their lies, and lying some more is not going to make the problem go away. Let's talk about the economy a little tiny bit. U.S. auto sales plunge dramatically as the consumer debt bubble continues to collapse. People are defaulting on their credit cards. People are not willing to use their credit cards. They're trying to pay them all off. And as a result, again, people do not have money to buy things. And they just got the sales figures for the month of April, and every single major U.S. auto manufacturer missed their sales projections by a wide margin. They're actually having to rent additional parking lots to store newly made cars because they don't have any place to put them. They're trying to keep the factories open. They don't want to shut the factory down. because it's actually a very long, involved process to shut an auto factory down and then at some point in the future start it back up again. It's not like just walking in the door and flipping on the circuit breaker. Down in Venezuela, their inflation is really taking off. It's approaching 2,000% per year as the economic collapse escalates. And you need to pay attention to what's going on in Venezuela and Brazil because it's going to be happening here. They can't keep up this Ponzi scheme much longer, and that's all it is. And the reason they can't is because there is no longer a mechanism to recycle the money accumulated at the top by the money junkies and send it back down to the bottom as decent wages and salaries for working and middle class people so that they can then pour it back into the economy and keep things going. Until that is corrected, this economy has to collapse. It's already locking up. Over in Flint, Michigan, despite the poor quality of the water coming out of those faucets, Flint has now put 8,000 people on notice for tax liens for unpaid water bills. When is it going to sink through to the powers that be that ordinary Americans are just flat out of money? They're broke. Do you think people don't want to have tap water? They want to have safe, healthy tap water. They can't even get that. Most people want to be able to pay their bills. That's why they want a decent paying job. And they are not out there. And that is the problem. The economy, the wealth inequality has brought the entire system to the edge of collapse. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And you don't really need me to tell you our economy is in serious, serious trouble. All you have to do is open your eyes and look around. Walk into your own town, village, suburban neighborhood where you live and try and see it as a tourist would. Just looking at everything, the decayed pavement, the corrosion, the retail vacancies, the number of homeless people. We're seeing iconic American companies vanishing. We almost need an endangered species program for some of these places, like Sears. They're pretty much in the death spiral. They're on the edge of having to declare bankruptcy. Now, there's another indicator. Do you remember 2 years ago, TV was flooded with all these commercials, we'll buy your old scrap gold. You don't want that old ring or bracelet or necklace. You send it on in and we'll melt it on down and send you back cash for it. Well, apparently that market has dried up. All the junk gold has already been scavenged up. And people don't have any. They don't have any left. We're sucked dry. And the vampire's getting angry at us because we're sucked dry. Bitcoin's doing well. They're getting really close to $1,500. And it's all over the place there. Still not entirely sure how that is supposed to work. I really should learn it, though, probably. Meanwhile, over in Iceland, the krona has been crowned the world's best-performing currency, according to Russia Today. It's doing very, very well against the euro and the dollar. It's amazing what jailing a few crooked bankers and writing off all the debt created through fraud can do, isn't it? Which is why you're probably not going to hear this on the corporate media either. Might give you debt slaves uppity ideas that you shouldn't be having here. Speaking of debt, I mean, we are basically $20 trillion in debt. It can never be paid off because of the very way private central banking is set up. And the more they inflate the money supply, the more it benefits the rich And it takes away value from the money you've already worked for, that you've got in your wallet, that you've buried in the mayonnaise jar out by the pineapple plantation. Inflation is another hidden tax because it is eroding real value from the ink and paper stuff. Because the ink and paper stuff has no intrinsic value in and of itself. But it does seem... Oh, there's the music. We're going to take a break for station identification, and we'll be right back. Do join us on the air, 800-313-9443. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. We've got a caller waiting on the line. I'm going to get to you in a minute, but I do want to close out on the economic part of our program here. Very troubling article out of Zero Hedge. Apparently, corporate insiders are dumping their own stocks at levels rarely seen. And we have seen this before in history, where the insiders know something is about to happen and they will liquidate and they will get out. Because that's what always happens. When there's a correction, when there's a crash, the insiders get out first and they drop the losses on everybody else around them. I guess they consider it a survival skill. I remember many years ago I worked on a movie called The Day the Bubble Burst, which was based on a book of the same name by a gentleman named William Hupt, who'd been a trader on the floor when the crash of 29 happened. And he actually brought in that last little piece of ticker tape with the day's losses, and he'd had it framed and everything. And he was just telling me all these stories about people who just had a gut hunch it wasn't going to hold together, and they were all bailing. All right, let's take a phone call. Brendan in San Francisco. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Speaking of the economy, gold is down to $12.38 right now. It hasn't been there in a while. I've been keeping an eye on it. The reason I called in today was I caught Mike Cernovich this morning, and he was dropping some pretty explosive how shall we say, news breaks, I guess. He's saying that McMaster's is out, the Trump administration, that he's crossed the line with Trump. Apparently he brought in a buddy of his and gave him his own office without Trump's knowledge. And everything that Cernovich has been saying has been coming true. He's got his someone on the inside. So what he's suggesting is they're going to promote McMaster's to a 4-star general, which is, I guess, very coveted.
Yes.
But I thought that was interesting. I wanted to share that because I think Cernovich has got he's on the pulse of something over there in the White House. He's breaking a lot of stuff lately.
Well, let me just say that it sounds strange if McMaster's is out, why give him a promotion? I mean, he could just simply be reassigned. And I know at that level in the government, nobody wants to say that you're fired, but it has happened. Usually, right. the way they go through is Trump would say, I would like you to resign. And McMaster says, yes, I'll resign. And maybe that was the quid pro quo, that he gets to be a 4-star. But that's still, unless McMaster's actually retires at the same time, then that gives him a lot of power and authority within the military establishment, which already seems to be going a little rogue as it is.
Right. He actually addressed that, and they were trying to put a positive spin on it. And he actually is going to land on his feet with a position on some committee or something. I'm not that well versed in that part of the government, but I just wanted to emphasize again that Cernovich he was on fire today. I mean, he had so many things to go over. I won't take up time on the show today with it, but I encourage people to look at him today. He was on InfoWars. He's actually he's being added to their staff. He's going to have a 1-hour spot per week. But one of the best things I saw was he went to the White House press briefing. He's got press credential for White House, and he chastised the White House reporters for not covering any of this Antifa violence against Trump supporters. And he even asked Spicer as he was walking out of the room, and everyone kind of, jeered at Cernovich. But there's a great video. I encourage you to go find it. And he lets them have it. And they're like barking back at him. There's videos. But very good stuff. I'm glad to see he's on the inside of the White House now. And they actually complained about him to the White House, that he was in there causing trouble, and they reviewed it, and they said, no, he was acting totally professional, courteous. He just simply asked a question of the media, and they chose not to respond.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly going to take a closer look at him. But again, there are too many missing pieces on this McMaster's story. And so I'm going to have to go digging after that a little bit. Yeah,
that's why I called you. I'd like to get your take on these things.
Well, I'm not up on that. Yeah, this is the first I've heard about it. And again, if Trump wants McMaster's out, I'd like to know which committee he's going to, and just sort of figure out what's going on behind the scenes. But if Trump really is shoving McMaster's out, I seriously doubt it's over the misuse of the office. And it may be that...
Oh, that was... He was feeding him false intelligence was one of the main things. Manipulating intelligence it's been an ongoing thing. And then
you mean McMaster's was feeding false intelligence information to Donald Trump? Well, that would certainly be a firing offense. And maybe Trump is finally going to start growing a spine and realizing, the sort of people that he has around him right now. I'd like to see that happen.
Yeah, I mean, when you were referencing Hillary today, it just came back to me like, why the heck is she still allowed to walk around? She's a clear and present danger to this republic. She should be locked up, and that's the one thing. I mean, I'm kind of all about the tar and feather now. We need to find these people and tar and feather them. Mm-hmm. I was at the movies yesterday, and they were promoting Al Gore's latest disinformation, global warming, and I'm going to the movies to kind of decompress and forget about this stuff, and here's Gore in my face. So I just started yelling at the screen. Keep in mind the theater's three-quarter full. I go, this man is a liar. He's a known liar. And all these women started rustling, and they were upset because they were also showing Trump. And I said, he's showing the coastal regions flooding. I go, why did he just buy a home on the coast? Why doesn't he have solar power on his mansions? And so I got the theater kind of in a little bit of a huff. And then I waited out in the lobby after the theater in case anyone wanted to come up and discuss what I had said. Mm-hmm. And an old gentleman he was very upset. And he's like, I can't believe the theater is showing that propaganda. So it kind of got a little bit of a debate going within the theater, which was kind of nice. But I mean, I couldn't sit there and through that, propaganda movie he's promoting.
Well, what's amazing, they tried to launch Inconvenient Sequel with all these claims by NASA and NOAA that it's the hottest year on record, blah, 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 blah. And yet we've just had a very late spring snowstorm, which has caused tremendous damage to the early spring crops. And we're all going to be feeling that pain at the supermarket.
Yeah, I'm telling you, people are brainwashed, and if we can reach them with facts, and I think Al Gore is a good target because he is buying mansions on coastal plains, and he
bought one. He bought one in Southern California, but it is beachfront, and we know the whole thing is a hoax. It's a scam. We live in a world that is of the scammers, by the scammers, and for the scammers. And then when we stand up and say we're tired of being scammed, they start throwing things at us. Okay?
Yeah, Paul Joseph Watson, he made a mockery of Leonardo DiCaprio accepting awards, green awards, while he's flying hairdressers around the globe to come do his hair and stuff like that, on jumbo jets. Thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go, and the phone lines are open again. We're going to do a quick little shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining the network. Just getting an update here. Tommy Lahren is back on Fox News. She had left, and now she's apparently back, so bridges may be mended over there, and we'll see what's going to happen there. Okay, turning over to the French election, there is a new phenomenon that is beginning to appear that may dramatically shift the outcome. Apparently, 14 million French voters are planning to hand in blank protest votes on Sunday's final election. The voters feel disenchanted with the state of French politics and feel that neither anti-migrant Marine Le Pen or centrist Emmanuel Macron represent them. But most of these people handing in the blank ballots were people expected to support Macron. So this 14 million vote boycott might propel Le Pen to the presidency. So we'll see what's going to happen there. Meanwhile, Theresa May is out there accusing the European Union of trying to affect this summer's upcoming election, and she's absolutely right, they're doing it. But it's okay for them to do it. I mean, it's not like it's Russia's doing it, but it's okay for Brussels to do it. It's okay for the United States to do it, and it's certainly okay for Israel to come on in and mess with your politics. But you Russians, you better not do that. You'd better not do that at all. Now, I mentioned earlier in the show this next story. Apparently, Brussels has now issued an order across all the European Union that all internal border checks have to be scrapped within 6 months. As you know, some of the member states of the European Union are suffering under this refugee influx, increased crime, rape, diseases, and they have started pulling away from Schengen and starting to actually have border controls again. And Brussels is saying, no, you take it all down. We are just one federated nation. We are in charge, and the refugees can come and go as they will. And this is obviously affecting countries like Austria, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway, who have reinstituted border controls. And they're going to be looking for some other way that they can try and keep the situation under control. Now, as you know, the Brexit is still ongoing. And this summer's election is probably going to be the difference between a hard Brexit and a soft Brexit. But at issue is the divorce payment. And every time Brussels opens its mouth, the amount of money Britain is expected to pay for the right to leave keeps going on up. And right now it is at £85 billion sterling, mostly on demands coming from France and Germany. That they need the money. Without the money coming from Great Britain, the European Union and the euro is going to collapse. And so what they're trying to do is come up with a way where Great Britain can go off and pretend that they've left the European Union, but they're still obligated financially. They're talking about a yearly tithe and maintenance of the open borders. So it's a Brexit in name only if Brussels gets their way. Now, here in the United States, things are getting interesting out in California. California is asking for $100 billion out of Donald Trump's $1 trillion infrastructure plan. Basically, 1/10 of the entire number. And the projects they have include improving roads, bridges, levees, ports, public transportation. So far, the Oroville Dam doesn't seem to be on there again. But they're asking for this money and still saying we refuse to enforce the immigration laws. So they're going to be building up to a fight there where they're going to try and say, yes, Washington, D.C. owes us this money and we don't have to enforce the immigration laws here. Out in California, the Department of Motor Vehicles has issued 800,000 driver's licenses to illegal immigrants over the last 2 years since the passage of Assembly Bill 60. And here's where it's starting to get really weird in terms of what country are we actually in here, because out in Huntington Park, California, 2 illegal immigrants were just named to Huntington Park city commissions. Julian Zadaran is from Sinaloa, and he just accepted an appointment to the Huntington Park Parks and Recreation Commission. Another illegal immigrant, Francisco Medina, has won an appointment to the Health and Education Commission. Needless to say, there are a lot of very angry people, including legal citizens, who wanted those appointments. And we may see protests going on over there as well. The mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, is expanding protections for immigrants who are in the country illegally, emphasizing the city of Los Angeles' refusal to help enforce the Trump administration's immigration crackdown. Now, he made a very interesting comment. He said, immigrants are the engine of the Los Angeles economy, with 2 out of 3 residents foreign-born or children of immigrants. In other words, Los Angeles has been taken over by the illegal immigrants. Everybody else moved out, the way Claire and I did some years ago. So that poses a problem, because if the illegal immigrants are removed, you're going to have a pretty much empty city and no tax base with which to repair the infrastructure under Los Angeles, which is in serious, serious shape. There are huge cracks in the water mains under Los Angeles, dumping tons of usable water into the soil underneath. And of course, that makes that soil much more easy to disrupt in the event of an earthquake. It really is a mess. Another story coming out of California. This is in the Desert Sun. And they're talking about California cases of alleged voting by illegal immigrants opened in 2016, 0. And the article is out there trying to say it was never a problem. We have 0 cases opened about illegal immigrants voting. But what they're actually saying is, they're not saying they didn't find any cases of illegals voting. They're saying they didn't even look. They didn't even look. Now, one of the reasons the illegal immigrants are being shown such latitude, given so many good things, there's money to be made off of them. There's a company, GEO Group, and it is a private prison company with contracts with governments around the world. And this company is getting rich off of Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. Down in Texas, this same company actually wrote the Texas bill extending how long immigrant children can be detained. So they're grabbing them, locking them up, not sending them back home, just holding them in these private prisons, and the private prison companies making buku bucks off of that. Now, the immigration group, ALAPAC, has withdrawn its endorsement of President Trump as of yesterday, basically over this issue of the border wall. Is it going to get built or not? And, of course, this emergency spending bill had money for things like Planned Parenthood, but no money for the border wall. Ann Coulter has an article out there saying, Swamp 47, Trump 0. Now, a lot of turmoil going on up. Actually, before I get into Berkeley, something I forgot to mention about this book, Being in Time. Gilad Atzmon devotes a lot of time analyzing the phenomenon of political correctness and showing that it actually has a very long history of being handmaiden to tyranny and dictatorship. And that's another reason you should get the book. But meanwhile, up in Berkeley, where the liberals are out there saying that we support free speech as long as you agree with us, the Berkeley School District is claiming the organizers of all these riots are literally brainwashing the students. And most Americans are now very aware of organizations like Antifa. And Antifa frequently turns peaceful events into total mayhem. They are funded by George Soros. In fact, Antifa actually made a video saying that George Soros owes them back pay. Soros is still trying to kick up chaos and turmoil in the United States of America, and I am not sure why he wants to do that at this point. At some point, the U.S. is going to have to be brought down in order to be made part of the New World Order. And maybe it's sooner than we think. Got to take a break for commercials. We will be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And apparently the State Department, in response to the escalating terror conditions all across Europe, has issued a travel warning for Americans to avoid going to Europe. That may be less about the safety of Americans and more about trying to keep Americans' travel tourism dollars inside the United States for this coming summer, because our tourism industry is in a slump. Remember yesterday they had that article, oh, it's Trump's talk and everything. And no, it isn't just Trump. It's the abuse of the TSA. It is the civil forfeiture that is taking cash from perfectly innocent travelers. That really discourages a lot of people from coming here, and we're feeling the pinch here in Hawaii from all of this stuff. But they have issued this travel warning saying that American tourists ought to think twice before going to Europe, which is a shame because Europe, at least as it was when I was there back in the 80s, it was beautiful. A very interesting article that sort of goes along with that same idea. This is from Zero Hedge. And the headline reads, outside the United States is terrifying, parentheses, according to the government. And they're basically talking about what appears to be a propaganda campaign to effectively increase the sense of isolation of Americans by saying, stay here, pay attention to the government, extremists are on the loose all over the world, and you should stay here. Maybe they're concerned that more Americans are going to be renouncing their citizenship, which is continuing to escalate. Now, we mentioned this yesterday, but we're going to mention it again because we got a confirmation. The suspect in the Texas stabbings was on Zoloft and was on a prescription for them. He wasn't just picking them up on the black market. And they're saying he had mental health trouble. Well, there's a lot of people who don't have mental health trouble until they're put on these medications. I remember there was this story, that horrible, tragic story came out a couple of years ago. A woman over in Great Britain, young woman, perfectly fine, perfectly healthy, goes to the doctor, and the doctor says, I think I'm going to give you this antidepressant. And she says, why? And he says, well, it'll just make you feel better. And she started taking it, and she started getting all these weird, bizarre symptoms. She goes back to the doctor, and the doctor, instead of saying don't take them anymore, says, well, we'll try something different. And went down this whole catalog of ever more powerful, ever more destructive psychiatric medication until it reached a point where she was not functional anymore, and she had to be put into a facility. These are very dangerous medications. Virtually all of the mass shooters wagged at us by the gun grabbers were either on or trying to withdraw from these very dangerous medications. But, of course, we're going to blame the guns. The guns are at fault because we're making too much money on the drugs. We'll blame the guns and take the guns. Gardasil has struck again. There is yet another case. This is being reported over Natural News. Mia Blesky, after getting the Gardasil shot, is now paralyzed on the left from the neck down. This is a former straight-A student, aspiring pop star who sang and danced, and she's now having to be homeschooled. And the doctors say it's all in her head, which is what they always say, or you abused your child. Now, over at Harvard, there's an immunologist, Tatiana Obukant, and basically is out there saying that contrary to the propaganda that you get on the news, unvaccinated children are not a problem. It is the vaccinated children who are sloughing off the infectious agent through their skin that are triggering these outbreaks. And we keep seeing these reports about an outbreak here, and then you find out the kids who came down sick had the vaccine for that illness. Medical care in this country is all about the money, and it's not about medical care. If the American people were all healthy, the entire medical industrial complex would collapse. Their business model requires you to be constantly ill. We're going to take another break for commercials. Do join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Now, getting on back to the subject of vaccines. Over at the Health Ranger, actually it's Natural News, but they're reporting on the Health Ranger. Basically, there is a coming program to test a malaria vaccine in Africa. It's highly toxic, very profitable, has some very nasty side effects. But apparently, in the journal Phytomedicine, they have a study on a plant, the Artemisia annua plant, which is able to cure patients suffering from drug-resistant malaria. These patients were unresponsive to any of the corporate medical treatments, and they were given this plant, and it cured them. And it did so without any toxic side effects. But again, the whole mindset of the medical industrial complex, they don't want to treat diseases with things that are growing in the forest or in your backyard. They want you dependent on their corporate supply pipeline in order to make huge amounts of money. We were talking yesterday about this new drug that goes for $700,000 a year to cure a brain disease in children. Unless you can demonstrate financial need, then it's only $400,000 a year. That's utterly ridiculous. Shameless profiteering. And again, a lot of those pharmaceutical medications you get at your local drugstore are actually derived from plant sources to begin with. And the plant sources are often just as effective and have fewer side effects. Because one of the ways the pharmaceutical companies justify higher prices is they add things to them. I keep thinking back to that story we reported on yesterday, where over in Germany, when they were vaccinating for the H1N1, the general population got the vaccine with the adjuvants, some of which are harmful, but they had a special vaccine made up for the rulers, for Angela Merkel and her top government officials, that was the vaccine without the adjuvants. So it makes you wonder, what is the purpose of the adjuvants? Is it a way of getting you addicted to the pharmaceutical industry? To literally, intentionally cause side effects that will require further treatment? No matter how cynical I get, I just can't keep up. Now, we're getting some updates now from James Comey's appearance before Congress today, and a couple of things have come on out. Apparently, in this Senate Judiciary Committee, Comey came on out and acknowledged Huma Abedin's classified emails were regularly forwarded to Anthony Weiner's computer. Now, to be accurate about it, at the time this was all going down, Huma and Anthony shared this computer. But it's still a violation of security protocols to have this information outside a controlled, secure computer network. Now, I hope they're not going to set up Huma Abedin to be the scapegoat here. But it's beginning to look like it. Hillary's fine, but Huma, oh, bad Huma, she's the one they're going to offer up and fry as a living sacrifice to keep the story, the cover story intact here. Something else James Comey did while he was under oath, he refused to confirm if the FBI is actually investigating accusations that the Obama administration spied on President Trump's election campaign and transition team. Comey basically came on out and said he could not confirm that in public without authorization from the Justice Department, which he said would have initiated any such investigation. So he's trying to dump this on Sessions. There should be an investigation. We know they were playing fast and loose with the FEMA rules. The only reason they got a FEMA warrant was to make the spying on Trump look legitimate, and the entire basis presented to the FEMA court to get that warrant was that dodgy dossier about Trump and the prostitutes in Moscow, which has been thoroughly discredited. So something weird is going on there. Now, here is a very bizarre story, and this is from John Rappaport. and it's for you pet owners out there. Apparently, Party Animal is recalling dog food that has tested positive for a euthanasia drug. It's a voluntary recall. It affects the company's Cocolicious dog food brand, and the affected products include 13-ounce cans of Cocolicious beef and turkey dog food, Cocolicious chicken and beef dog food, and they're working with distributors trying to get all this stuff back. But if you have a dog and you buy that brand, read the article, check the lot numbers on your cans of the product. You may have to take them on back in. And I kind of wondered, how does pentobarbital get into dog food? And I had a couple of alert readers who explained what's going on, and I was unaware of this. Apparently, when you take your very ailing animal to the veterinarian and they can't be saved and they're put down with pentobarbital. The veterinarians, unless you have arranged for a plot in a pet cemetery, which is very, very rare, the veterinarian companies sell the carcass of the animal to rendering companies, which basically grind it up and put it back into dog food. So your dog may be eating dog food made out of dog. Your cat may be eating cat food made out of cat. That's going to weird them out a little bit. But apparently, the pentobarbital that is used to euthanize these pets is getting through the rendering process into the pet food. And even if it doesn't kill your pet, it's got to be causing some degree of harm. Maybe there's a solution for Ohio. Make the condemned prisoners eat the dog food. If they can't get the chemicals here. Yes, the airlines. American Airlines has announced they're cutting even more legroom in economy class. Now, I haven't been on American, actually I haven't been on a flight at all for a while, but I remember the last time I was in economy class, I literally could not put my feet on the floor because the seat in front just banged into my knees, and now they're going to shrink them up even. Next, they're going to have everybody standing for the entire flight. Just pack them in that way, like the Japanese subway train. All right, let's talk about human-caused global warming. There's a video that is up on whatreallyhappened.com. As you know, there was this horrendous late spring snowstorm all over the eastern part of the country. We've been talking about it for the last few days and wagging our finger at Al Gore. But as it turns out, there's a downside. It has caused huge losses to spring crops. And apparently at least 32% of U.S. winter wheat was lost in the first week of this month. And there are other agricultural losses mounting in the other areas where snow and cold temperatures were coming down, hitting avocados, lemon, fruit losses across Europe, vineyards up to 50% loss. This is the beginning of the mini ice age, the Maunder minimum. Boy, remember back in 2000 when they were saying snowfalls are now a thing of the past because of human-caused global warming. Now, earlier we had talked about this story out of United Airlines where there was this rabbit breeder who had a giant bunny that was expected to grow to be the world record holder, and the breeder had already found a customer to buy this world record rabbit for who knows what purpose, put it on display, put it on a zoo. And the bunny unfortunately died on this flight. It has now come on out that the prize animal was still alive and in good shape when taken off the plane coming from London's Heathrow Airport to Chicago's O'Hare Airport, but was apparently stored in an unheated part of the luggage storage area for 16 hours where it froze to death in the unseasonably cold weather. Now, United Airlines has paid a 5-figure compensation to the breeder. They won't say exactly how much, and part of the deal is the breeder is not going to talk about it. So they're trying to make that one go away. But there's another example. We are not seeing a warming world, regardless of what NASA, NOAA, and Al Gore are telling you. So let's talk about computers. I haven't gone out to look at Spectrum recently. Like I said at the top of the show, it's a bit better here. It's not as molasses as it was yesterday, but we're still only getting 10% of the bandwidth we're supposed to be paying for. And that, of course, has led to a lawsuit by New York State against Spectrum, Charter Communications. And I think there ought to be more of them. And all it took in New York was enough people on Spectrum measuring their internet speed. There are all kinds of free tests all over. Vonage has one, Verizon has one, AT&T has one. And you will actually get your real download and upload speeds. And no, they're not going to be all the way to the top of what you're paying because of overhead in the computers, especially if you're using a router. In fact, to get an accurate speed test, you need to go directly to the cable modem. But if you're paying for 300 megabits per second and you're getting 30, that is a serious, serious problem. And people need to start complaining and start getting these lawsuits going. We have, as a nation, become entirely too complacent with poor quality, poor service, skyrocketing prices. And there's one area where we can stand up, try and make a difference, and that is holding the corporate culture to account, saying if we give you our money for something, you better deliver the product that you promise. And not just say, oh, it's your fault, it's your fault, it's your fault, which is what we get whenever we call customer support on Spectrum, for that Time Warner. Oh, it must be in your house. You should power cycle your router, power cycle your cable modem, do this, do that, all of which I've done. And again, looking at the outage map for Spectrum on Down Detector, it's obviously a nationwide issue. Reading the comments and complaints there are areas in the U.S. where Spectrum Internet is just absolutely down. And tech support is out there trying to convince you it's at your end and it's not their problem. And if you really insist it's their problem, they'll send you a technician 2 to 3 weeks in the future. They're avoiding responsibility for what they're doing. And as we also reported yesterday, officially Spectrum says they do not throttle internet speeds. And yet a document from their own website under network management says that, yes, to deal with congestion, they enforce speed limits. Their whole rationale for saying we're not throttling you is we're not using that word. But that's exactly what they're doing. If you're not getting what you pay for, whether it's computers or cable TV or anything that you buy, you have a right and an obligation to stand up and say this needs to be dealt with. If your supermarket has spoiled food on the shelf, you need to make a stink about it. That's one way we can start pushing back on this corporatocracy. One of the biggest mistakes for the American people that was made by the U.S. government was starting to offer product liability indemnification. And two very obvious examples are computers and vaccines. Now, way back at the very beginning of the home computer revolution, when it was the Apple II and the Commodore VIC-20, which I still have a working one up here, it made sense to protect these young fledgling companies from disasters, like the one that hit the company that I was associated with, put out a virus on the Challenger flight simulator disk. But computers and software are not a fledgling, fragile industry anymore. They're multi-billion-dollar behemoths, and product liability should be allowed back in again. The way it is set up right now is really very simple. If you own a business and you buy a delivery van, and because of a design defect, that van crashes and you suffer financial harm, you are allowed to sue the manufacturer of the van for your financial losses. If you own a business and you buy a computerized accounting system, and because of a design flaw, it crashes and you suffer financial harm, you are not allowed to sue the computer and software company. That's actually the law. It's in that end-user license agreement. We make no promises. This stuff may not even work, but we've got your money, and that's all that really matters. It's actually a law that protects them. Now, the other one is the vaccine industry, because in the Homeland Security Act that created the Department of Homeland Security, there was actually a rider on that bill that indemnified vaccine manufacturers from civil litigation for mistakes they make with their products. The rationale was that in the event of a biological weapons attack, the vaccine makers had to be protected if they had to fast-track vaccines through and somebody goofed. But the reality is that indemnification has been there all along, and we are seeing a lot of damage caused by vaccines. And the vaccine makers have no incentive to do a better job, because nothing bad happens to them. If you are a parent, your child is vaccinated and suffers harm, you go to the vaccine injury court, and for the most part, on their part, they take this now discredited CDC report saying there is no link between vaccines and autism, and they deny you any payment. So just go on home and live with the fact that you have an autistic child. It's probably your bad genes, or you abused the child. It's all about protecting the money. They're not interested in caring for the American people or protecting you. It's all about protecting the money. In the eyes of the United States government, the money is far more important than you, the American citizen, and that definitely has to change. Now, speaking about computers, late last week, the National Security Agency came on out with this announcement that they were no longer bulk scanning Americans' emails. The Fourth Amendment is back. Huzzah, huzzah. You can relax and go on back to writing whatever you want in your emails and nobody's peeking, which I didn't believe when it came on out. And then, of course, we had William Binney come on out and say the way the system is designed, they have to scoop up all the email before they can go to a targeted individual with a warrant. So now we're seeing another article out of Reuters saying exactly the same thing. More when we come back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We just had a helicopter fly by low enough where the wind came through the window and sort of blew things around in here. Finishing up on this story, Reuters is now admitting that the NSA is still collecting your phone records despite the change in the law. So something to keep in mind here. We're going to take a phone call. Matthew in Oregon, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thank you for taking my call. I'm a big fan. And one thing that I believe the globalists are doing is they inundate us with so much corruption on so many different levels and so many, it's a barrage, and it doesn't end. And I want to remind the viewership that, going back to what Mayor Rothschild said, give me control of the country's currency, I care not who makes the laws. And that's what we need to focus on. Get control of the money back to fund all this, stop the funding of this corruption. If you look at Wells Fargo Wachovia, $386 billion in drug trafficking money, and they get a slap on the wrist? That's like you and I walking into a bank, robbing it, and throwing a couple hundreds on the floor saying thanks for the opportunity. We have to get everybody focused on the monetary issue because that makes the world go around. We all know it. Take that power out of their hands, get it back in the people's hands, then we've got a fighting chance to stop the corruption and cut off the money junkies, as you refer to them.
Well, we definitely have to do that, and the United States was originally set up that way. There were very strict limits on campaign contributions so that a politician, the size of their war chest was a direct measure of their popular support, and the laws were written so that large moneyed interests did not have any more effect on politics than any other citizen. Of course, that has now all been whittled away. Even Abraham Lincoln was warning about how the rise of corporate power and corporate money was a threat to the republic itself, and that's exactly what happened. We're ruled by the money, and the money is in the hands of people who are unelected, unaccountable, with delusions of godhood.
Well, and it was, I think, about 20 years ago that we had that critical tipping point where more than half of the country's citizens either worked for the government, had a contract for the government, or were on welfare. And those people are never going to vote money out of their own pockets. That's just a simple reality.
Yeah.
Was it Jefferson that said give this type of government about 200 years and then it'll collapse because people learn how to vote money into their own pockets? Well, he was absolutely correct.
Actually, what Jefferson said was he only expected the government he designed to last 200 years, and then the corruption would accumulate to the point where the American people would revolt. And that was the statement. But yeah, when the money becomes
about
concentrated,
20 years late on that, but that's okay.
Actually, it was only 100 years that Jefferson said. But yeah, once you have large amounts of wealth accumulating, it will always vote more money into its own pocket. And it isn't that they have any more votes than we do. It is that they now have open access to our politicians. The Capitol building is a giant one-stop shopping mall for all the corrupting influences in the country.
There's a big for sale sign there.
Yeah.
Washington, D.C. has a big for sale sign right on the front lawn.
All right.
You got enough money, you can get whatever and whoever you want. The one other thing I was hoping to add.
I'm going to have you hold. Just stay on the line. We'll come right back to after station identification. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443, and we're talking with Matthew in Oregon. You had one more point you wanted to make.
Yes, and there's an adage that I try and live by, and that's either you're a part of the problem or you're a part of the solution. And I would challenge anybody that is out there griping about what's going on to put their money where their mouth is. If you give your money to Wells Fargo, to U.S. Bank, to Bank of America, to Chase, you are definitely a part of the problem, and you're allowing your resources to be used against you. Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate the time and letting me share my opinion.
All right, well,
thanks an awful.
All right, thank you for the phone call. We're going to let you go. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And I'm seeing other articles online starting to pick up on this Reuters report, where even the corporate media is now forced to admit the NSA is still spying on all of us despite the passage of the USA Freedom Act. And apparently, despite that act, the NSA has collected at least 151 million records of American phone calls last year. They only had 42 warrants. They're still operating outside the law and in complete violation of the Fourth Amendment. The reality is, we're getting a raw deal. We're not getting the government that we're supposed to. Because that contract, that Constitution and the Bill of Rights, that's the contract. The government obeys those rules and follows those limitations, and we, the American people, will support it. And when the government steps outside that contract, when they break the contract, then we, the American people, no longer owe them our obedience, our loyalty, our money, and certainly not the life and limb of our children in their wars of conquest. Now, apparently a hacker group, the Dark Overlord, which already tells us it's a bunch of young kids, are basically trying to hold Netflix to ransom, where basically if Netflix does not agree to the ransom, the Dark Overlord hackers are going to just release TV shows that are on Netflix for a fee to the Internet. And if they're in Great Britain and they get caught, that could be an issue, because Great Britain's digital economy bill is now law. And Internet file sharers can be jailed for up to 10 years if they knowingly make infringing content available to the public and expose a copyright owner to even a risk of loss. Now, as I mentioned before with this attack into Google, hacking into their double-click ad network to plant malware, we're now talking serious financial losses to Google, to Zito, and now to Netflix, and maybe finally we're going to get the government to start paying attention. When it was just individual citizens having to buy huge amounts of security software they can't afford, or being held up for ransomware, the government's attitude was, big deal. It's good for the computer security industry. But now that there's major losses to corporations, the attitude might change. Now, if you use Google Docs, you need to be very careful. Apparently, Google Docs users are being hit with a sophisticated phishing attack. Now, dealing with my hack attack over the weekend, I reinstalled Google Chrome, and the first thing I do is turn off all the extensions for Google Docs and Google this and Google that. But if you're using it, you need to be careful, need to read this article. It's on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. All right, let's take 2 phone calls. Frank in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, to follow up on what the last caller said, I was wondering, do you have an opinion one way or the other on the difference between a credit union and a bank?
There's a little bit of difference. Most people seem to like the credit unions, which tend to be organized or more around an idea of community service than of profit making. But the really big difference, though, is between a normal depositor bank, which is the bank that you have your checking account at, or the credit union, versus the private central banks, which, even though they use the name bank, it's a completely different operation. And credit unions and depositor banks in your neighborhood actually serve a very useful function because it collects up unused wealth and consolidates it in order to focus it on things the community can benefit from, like starting a new business, building homes, and so forth and so on. The private central banks exist to basically plunder the people and enrich the bankers. And they're able to get away with it because they're made the law of the land by politicians who, as Aaron Russo used to say, would sell their own mother for $1.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we're going to switch over to Fred in Wisconsin. Fred, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
A couple of things you said earlier. First of all, this McMaster's thing about 4 stars. That's the highest pension that you can get in the U.S. military outside of possibly 5-star, and I don't think there's a lot of 5 stars walking around.
I don't think there are. I don't think there are any. I thought 4-star was as high as you could go. I know.
Yeah, well, that's what it's the highest pension that anybody could be given, which is like a get out of free, jail free thing. And then the other thing that you were talking about when you were talking about this budget thing, that's this play was in works under Obama before he took office, before Trump took office. This was unfinished business.
Okay.
Half of that stuff had been drawn out. What the tell card in this, if you want to look at it in this way, is when we get to the new fiscal year, which is, I believe, the end of September, October, then a whole new set of budget things go into play. And that is where we're going to see what Trump has got. Because if he's going to do something, it's going to happen on that, in that sense. I don't think he had a lot of time or ability to throw. They threw him under the bus, but I think what will really tell the future here is what happens in the next budget, which is only a few months away.
Well, again, Trump appeared to cave to get his budget to avoid a shutdown. Well,
he did get a few things. He didn't get what he really wanted, but he did get a couple of things going. And like I said, I think this is the tell card. If we get to this next situation and he starts throwing some of these things that he really wants into the budget, then we'll see what happens. But I really think his hands were tied pretty much in this situation, because normally that budget would have been done before Trump took office. I think it works on the Democrat side that they leave this type of stuff languishing on the side of the road and waiting for Trump to drive by. It's like an explosive device. So it's just my opinion, but I thought I would put it out there.
No, that's a very, very good opinion, because anybody who's ever done business, for example, with the Japanese, they know it's a common negotiating trick. You will go over to Japan for 2 weeks to make some kind of a deal, and for the first 12 days you are wined and dined and taken out into the countryside and the museums and everything. They won't even talk business until you're coming up on when you must get on that airplane to come back home, and that's when they'll sit down and say, here's the deal, yes or no. And it's a way of forcing the issue. And it does feel like that's what the Democrats did with the emergency spending bill.
It's a great analogy.
As well. Yeah,
great analogy on your part. Thank you for your time.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go and switch over to Francis in North Carolina. Aloha, Francis. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, aloha to you, young man. Actually, to both of you anyways. In light of the aspect of not allowing our finances and all that to go towards the war machine, the hate machine, the blood-sucking machine, and so forth ad nauseum, and among other things, as far as the political scene goes and the military-industrial complex goes. In light of that, you have the Internal Revenue Service, or Internal Revenue Service, what do you want to call it, that if you do not file your taxes April 15th and basically divvy yourself up to the bar and dish out whatever to them and so forth as per your tax return, otherwise you get imprisonment unless you have a good lawyer that actually can deal with keeping your tail out of it. And yet, how do you avoid, which is one thing I don't think I've ever heard anyone address. If I did, I've missed it somewhere, who knows what. But how does one avoid having to dish out after they've had taxes taken out of their pay, whenever they get paid, and still they get sucked out again when they go to do the tax filing, when they're going to find out that they still owe again on top of what's been taken out?
Well, that's why a lot of people look at taxes as really just government-sanctioned robbery, and rather than go into the whole situation on the show, have you ever seen Aaron Russo's From Freedom to Fascism?
Long time ago, and I have very little memory of it.
Well, you need to go back and you need to look at it again, and next commercial break I'm going to go ahead and put it up on the website for your convenience. But basically, Freedom to Fascism runs through a lot of these issues about whether the income tax is even legal or constitutional. But again, knowing that, you know, with most Americans understanding that the government did lie to us about Saddam Hussein's nuclear weapons, it's time to start asking, what else did they lie to us about?
True. The question is, how does the everyday person enforce the aspect of saying, no, you're not doing this to me, and I am not paying you?
Well, the individual, as you say, is powerless to do that. It's going to take a mass uprising of the American people to say, stop robbing us. And again, my hope is that this government will have a Soviet Union-style collapse, and when we are restarting the new government, the first commandment carved in stone will be no more private central banks. Because if you go back and you look at the history of private central banking, every time a private central bank is empowered, there is an income tax on the people at the same time, because that's what feeds that private central bank.
And we're better off with the collapse because, quite frankly, there's not going to be a mass rising of people. No way. If it did, it would have happened a long time ago.
Well, I agree with you on that, and again, I really don't want to see a mass uprising of the people in the violent sense. But again, I think if 4 million unarmed, peaceful protesters walked into Washington D.C. And sent a message, "We've had it, you're fired," that they might actually get that message.
That would be nice, but the problem is they'd be laughed at. On top of that, they'd be arrested.
How do you arrest somebody for protesting peacefully under their First Amendment protections? Because we still have that right to speak our mind, to petition the government for redress of grievances, to gather peacefully.
Right.
And that's why I'm saying, you know, unarmed people, peaceful people, because that's still protected.
Right.
That's still protected speech.
You're right. It's a question of how it's enforced. Thanks so much, Michael.
All right. Thanks an awful lot, Francis. We're going to let you go. We're going to do a quick little shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. Getting on back to the world of computers, interestingly enough, there's a privacy group is now filing suit against the New York Police Department for its secretive and unregulated facial recognition program. And their concern is, based on the past history of facial recognition systems, that it will misidentify people and cause innocent people to be investigated or arrested or even killed. Because it is not a robust technology. It does make mistakes. I think the most obvious example is facial recognition can't discriminate between identical twins or even familial twins. It's not a robust system. And I think the people of New York and the privacy group have a right to know exactly what the New York Police Department is doing so that they can point on out and say, this system is flawed, it makes mistakes. That would be a necessary element in a defense where you are charged with a crime based solely on the facial recognition system saying, I saw this person at the scene of the crime while the crime was being committed. You have to know how the system works in order to be able to mount a reasonable defense. And so I think this privacy group is very much in the right. We should not have secret testimony in courts against the people, and we should not allow secret technology to bear witness against people in court. It's just common sense. Now, one of the members posted a story to our website where DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, is planning to hack the human brain to upload skills. This is right out of the movie Matrix, where you're plugged in and they say, I need the operating manual on this helicopter, and then all of a sudden you're a helicopter pilot. And DARPA is apparently going to throw quite a bit of money at this. I do not think it will work for a very simple reason. Our brains are all uniquely different. The way your brain develops is actually influenced by your life experience. And how your memories are stored are different from one person to the next to the next. It's not like a computer where it's all the same operating system and it's all the same memory architecture and you can plug in a USB drive and have things assigned to the correct place. So I think this is another DARPA boondoggle, where your mind remembers what the color red looks like may be completely different from what this next person, where in their brain they remember what the color red looks like. I really don't think it can be made to work. I know that Elon Musk wants to come up with some kind of a direct-to-brain interface. I think in his case he's thinking more along the lines of being able to have you interface directly with a thought-to-text system or send media directly into your brain, and I'm not even sure they could get that to work. But to actually have knowledge fed into your brain, I think the diversity of brains is going to make that impossible. Okay, let's see. Did we do Karen in Maryland? Okay, we're going to go to Karen in Maryland. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi there. Okay, well, these are my two questions. The first is, what is the definition of a government shutdown?
Well, the definition of a government shutdown is that they have run out of money for certain operations. And during the last shutdown, basically they closed down all the museums and the national parks. Basically, they closed down all the things we, the American people, actually want from the government, but all the things that we don't like kept on running just fine, like the war machine.
Okay, so is that official definition found on a website that you're aware of?
No, it's basically ad hoc, but that's what happened in the last government shutdown. It's not a complete shutdown of the entire government. It's selective.
Okay, all right. Okay, and then question number 2 is, where does the revenue go from the paid federal income taxes? Because I understand that it does not actually go for government services. So where does that revenue actually go? Where does it end up?
It goes to the Federal Reserve for repayment on all the money the government has borrowed before, and then the government operates on more money it is borrowing from that private central bank.
So it does not actually go for, like, say, visiting the Library of Congress, or it doesn't go for any services that the federal government is responsible for running. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the government is borrowing its operational budget from the Federal Reserve, and all tax revenues are basically put back into the Federal Reserve to try and make payments on the interest of the accumulated debt carried forward from the past. And
wow.
Yeah, it is a messed up system.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to let you go. And now then, surprisingly, or at least to Apple's executives, iPhone sales are in a slump. And Apple is basically saying that it's a pause because customers are waiting for the next iPhone. They want the latest and the greatest. 5, 10 years ago, that may have been accurate, but again, I think there's this mindset to not face up to the reality that the American people are just flat out of money, and they're not going to buy things unless they absolutely need them. And this is a bit of a pushback from what is called the need/desire theory of marketing, and we'll talk about that after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. So I was talking about need versus desire. And many years ago, I used to work in the advertising industry. And for most of the early years of the U.S. economy, marketing was based on need. You would go on out and you would market your products to people who needed to buy that product. Then when we started getting into this idea of planned obsolescence, the advertising would change, where you'd go to somebody who already had the product you're selling, but you'd have a better product, and you would fan their desire to have the new one. And it did result in increased commerce, increased manufacturing, and it did cause the economy to boom. But when you have a healthy economy, that can work. But when your economy is locking up and people don't have money, they go back, they pull back from desire-based sales pitches to need-based. Yeah, the iPhone 8 is nice. I have an iPhone 5 that's still working. I don't need a new phone. And that's why we're seeing so many retailers in trouble. They became dependent on desire-based marketing, and that simply doesn't work in the new economic reality. So that's what's going on here. Now then, if you are over there on Google Play, there's an app called the Super Free Music Player. It's attracted several thousand downloads already, and you're being warned, do not download it. It is malware. So apparently DoubleClick was not the only part of the Google universe hackers got into to plant malware. And it is really out of control. It's open season on computer users around the world right now. Story coming out of Tech Radar, Intel has finally patched a critical vulnerability in its vPro processors. The worrying part is they've known about this flaw for no less than 7 years. And the problem apparently allows escalation of privilege vulnerability in Intel's active management technology, Intel standard manageability, and Intel small business technology firmware. A bug which could be used by an attacker to gain full control over a computer, then install malware and take other nefarious actions. Now, fortunately, these are all business platform CPUs, and the Intel CPUs aimed at the consumer market, that's you. It's not going to affect you. But it's kind of amazing. It took them 7 years. 7 years to deal with that. Now, over in Great Britain, again in response to the Digital Economy Act, British police have a new authority. They can remotely disable your telephone even if no crime has been committed. Now, the rationale behind this is they're getting ready to make a drug bust. They disable the suspect's phone so they can't call for help, or somebody can't call them and say the cops are outside your home. But obviously, this is wide open to abuse, where the police are just going to disable your phone just because they don't like how you look. There are no safeguards. They're applying the punishment before the crime occurs. And what if the crime doesn't occur? What if you're acting all nervous and stressed out trying to make a phone call, and the police think you're up to something no good, and the reality is you're trying to call for an ambulance? The misuse of this authority could lead to people, innocent people, being killed. I think at this juncture, we need to understand a very basic reality of government. If the capability to do something exists, inevitably they're going to want to be able to do it. They're still operating in a desire-based mindset. I want it. I want the Scorpion. I want the Stingray. I want to be able to disable phones, just in case. Don't have a real reason. I just want it. And that's really very dangerous for a wide variety of reasons. We'll be right back. Join us on the air, 800-313-9443. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're getting some more updates on the crop losses from this recent storm here. And according to Justin Gilpin, Chief Executive of the Grower-Funded Kansas Wheat Commission, they lost the western Kansas wheat crop this last weekend. So you can expect prices for produce, wheat, to start going up. And Claire and I actually had a little taste of it this morning. We did our normal grocery shopping, and it was a lot more than we were used to, based on items that derive from wheat and various vegetables, so forth and so on. So keep an eye out for that. Interestingly enough, another article out of Microsoft Network, the month of May was an unseasonably cold snap for southern Ontario. And they're saying it's going to last for 5 days, and it is one of the most significant bouts of cold weather Toronto's ever seen in May. So we're beginning to see the signs of a new Maunder minimum. And basically, that's where it is. Now, Al Gore is making the rounds of film festivals with his inconvenient sequel. And the appropriate people are being encouraged to say it's a wonderful movie, everybody must see it. But reading reviews by people not affiliated with the corporate media who have actually seen the preview, they're saying it's just more of the same. It's fear-mongering. It's trying to scare people into buying carbon credits and paying carbon taxes. I'm looking at the member news over at my website, and I'm seeing all these articles like civil unrest in Oregon. Apparently, there's even civil unrest going on in Washington, D.C. Amazing. Amazing here. Now then, the other day I made a misstatement. I need to correct it. I was reading this article, and the headline, turns out it was misleading, where it said that Donald Trump was saying the Constitution was archaic. And that wasn't entirely accurate. What Donald Trump actually said was the rules of the U.S. Senate are what is archaic. And the rules of the Senate are set by the Senate. They are not, in fact, in the Constitution itself. And these rules are very convoluted, things like filibusters and all kinds of very bizarre rules. And they've accumulated over the decades as attempts to outmaneuver the majority party by the minority party, and it has built up to a little bit of a nest. And perhaps some drastic simplification is in fact needed there. But basically at this point, what we're hearing out of this article that's coming out of Fox News no less is basically Trump is saying it is congressional gridlock that is preventing him from carrying out many of the promises he made to the voters. He's being constrained. He's being limited. And that certainly would seem possible. Now, we talked about this the other day, and this article on the Next Web is carrying it forward. We're talking about conflict diamonds, or conflict-free diamonds. And the idea is that when you go to the jewelry store, there are two categories of diamonds. There are diamonds that are produced in conflict-free areas, like the De Beer mines in South Africa. Then there are diamonds that are being mined to fund war in conflict zones. And there is a general sense that one should not buy conflict diamonds because then one is contributing to that war, which does make sense. But unfortunately, some of this is also about marketing, about preserving existing diamond mines against upstart newcomers who may be near conflict but not necessarily supporting the war effort. So now we've got this article from the Next Web, and they're talking about how there's an online diamond seller that claims all their diamonds are conflict-free, and an investigation is saying that may not actually be the reality. And people are willing to spend more money to get a conflict-free diamond, and so they're getting ripped off. They're getting ripped off in the process. We have become a nation of scammers, and it has got to stop, because it's a clear and present danger to our nation to just adopt scams as an acceptable way of life, or poor quality products as an acceptable way of life, or the invasions of our privacy as an acceptable way of life. We've become way too complacent. We have become too complacent, and it is time to get angry about what's going on. And I'm sure the liberals will say, well, you're not being politically correct if you're being angry. Well, too bad. It's okay to be angry. It's a survival mechanism. It didn't just happen by accident. We evolved to feel anger and rage and even hate because it served a survival purpose. And we need to get back to that, because our very survival is on the line right now. Here's a bizarre story coming out of Pennsylvania, and it is a reminder of just how out of control corporate power has become in this country. Over in Huntingdon County, they have passed an ordinance where if you are protesting a pipeline on your own property, you can be arrested and put in jail. And apparently it relates to a pipeline being laid by Sunoco. And the citizens were saying that they didn't want it going through their land because of the known hazards of leaking pipelines. And Common Pleas Court Judge George Zanuck signed a rare writ of possession order that now gives Sunoco Security the authority to arrest and imprison you for protesting a pipeline they are building across your own property. And it's another reminder, under this government, money is much more important than people. The Founding Fathers set up this country to make sure the people had the power. And it has been stolen from us bit by bit over the ages. Should have been paying more attention to it. But that's where we are. Let's see, there's another story here. Sacramento, in Southside Park. Apparently there is a church there, Our Lady of Guadalupe Church. And every Sunday during the services in this adjacent lot, there are street vendors who set up little tables with muffins and lemonade. And apparently the Sacramento police came on in because there were no permits. They didn't just shut the street dealers down. They confiscated and destroyed all their property. And the entire raid was captured on Facebook Live video, going viral. And it's another case of enforcement. You will go to the corporations. You will not provide for yourself. You will not sell to each other. You will get whatever you get, food, beverage. It has to be from a corporation. And that really is tyranny and dictatorship. Okay, our phone lines are still open, 800-313-9443. And apparently, this is just breaking. As you know, the Senate is having their hearings on the allegations that Russia hacked the election. Susan Rice has refused the Senate's request to testify as to what she knows or doesn't know, more to the point, that supports these allegations. And she's just flat out refused to show on up. And I hope the Senate will issue a subpoena. And if she refuses that, she's open to arrest. But this tells us right there, the story was bogus. They cannot back it up. Amazing. Amazing, amazing stuff. Apparently, the Syrian army has now seized huge quantities of drugs being smuggled by trucks to the moderate rebels near Damascus. Let's see. Okay, getting on back here. Oh boy. Long-haul flight. I'm hemming and hawing. I actually ran out of talking points here because we had so few phone calls today. But apparently Donald Trump is giving serious consideration to moving the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. This is from Mike Pence. And, this one is still ongoing. Janet Napolitano, former head of the Department of Homeland Security, she's was also head of Berkeley University. She's being investigated for concealing $175 million in a secret slush fund. At the same time, she was demanding more money from the state. So hopefully that will go someplace as well. Protesters and police continue to clash as D.C. devolves into an all-out war zone. This is a story, Claire called my attention to it before. The United States has deployed a high-altitude surveillance drone to Japan to monitor North Korea's activities amid heightened tensions with Pyongyang. This is an RQ-4 Global Hawk drone with the ability of collecting aerial data from an altitude of about 15 kilometers. And it will be in Japan on a 5-month mission spying on North Korea. Now, if North Korea shoots it down, I have absolutely no doubt that the U.S. government will say it's an act of war. But actually flying a drone into somebody else's country without permission, that is an act of war as well. And it seems like they're announcing these things to try and provoke Kim Jong-un into doing something. Normally when you send a surveillance drone someplace, you don't announce it. You don't want them looking up at it, possibly trying to shoot it down. This is an attempt to goad Kim Jong-un. The same thing with the story that came out earlier today where U.S. commandos are prepared to go on in and do targeted strikes on the ballistic missile sites and the nuclear arsenal. That's something that you don't telegraph ahead of time in the news unless you're trying to provoke a reaction. And that seems to be what's going on. And again, to recap, look at all the nations the United States has invaded, drone-struck, regime changed over the last 16 years. The one common factor in all of them is that none of these countries had nuclear weapons with which to deter an outside invasion. The United States looks pretty butch when they go up against a country that doesn't really have all that much of a military. And the reason the United States is trying to pressure North Korea into surrendering or dismantling its nuclear weapons is to make it easy to invade them somewhere down the road. The same thing with pressuring Iran to abandon its nuclear program. Make it easier to invade. And we know Iran was on that list Wesley Clark leaked back in 2005 of countries that are going to be invaded by the United States. And Iran was the last one. We're going to take a phone call here. Nico in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I had some questions about cryptocurrency. I did see that you talked about Germany and the Deutsche Mark yesterday.
Yes.
And I appreciate that. I think I sent some info to you on that a couple days ago. The cryptocurrency, though, my main question is, and it's really simple, is it safe? Like, can somebody flip a switch and I don't have my money anymore?
Well, I think if any kind of money that you have in any form that's inside the bank's computers can be taken away at the flip of a switch. And that's probably one of the reasons why I didn't really look into the cryptocurrency as much, because I don't see it as being inherently safer than the other. I mean, most of our currency is electronic as it is. And hackers can get at it and take it away. And there have been a couple of cases where Bitcoin exchanges have failed spectacularly from manipulation, and Bitcoin exchanges have been broken into and the Bitcoin's taken. It doesn't strike me that it is a robust technology. But in the end, and going back to the founding of this nation, true freedom means that you have your wealth under your control in some kind of a tangible asset that is portable that you can take with you. And, of course, that is what the banks are trying to get rid of as we edge closer and closer to runs on the bank, and we're starting to see them up in Canada. And the theory behind the cash-free society is you are not allowed to have your own wealth under your own control anymore. It must be by law in some bank somewhere where they can move it around and play with it all they want.
Well, here's a little bit of info. I buy physical silver. And then, I have it in a safe location that nobody knows about. I don't really talk about it very often to anybody. But I will tell people here that if you buy physical silver for delivery from Monex, and I don't know how other companies are, but the purchase from and the sale to that company of silver currency, it's got to be maple leaves or it has to be eagles, those transactions are not reported to the IRS by Monex. It's up to the actual purchaser. It's up to the customer to report that to the IRS. Just something to know.
That is something good to know because, again, when the cash-free society is declared by imperial edict, parallel with it will be a ban on physical investment metal. And they did that over in India, and it's caused all kinds of chaos. But again, we had a ban on physical gold here in the United States of America back in 1933. And it was done to save the banks. And the American people were ordered to turn in their gold coins and gold bars in exchange for nice little pretty stacks of ink and paper, which the value has since inflated away on. And it was done, again, to save the bankers because to a government, money is much more important than people.
Perfect, Mike. Aloha. Thanks for everything, and have a good one, okay?
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. It is getting kind of weird out there. Looking here at, somebody sent me the Cross of Iron speech. That is, I'm going to get that put up on the website so that you can see that, or read it at any rate. Russia is now proposing 4 de-escalation zones in Syria to restart the stalled peace process. Now, the only reason the peace process stalled was because of that false flag gas attack in Idlib. And so what Russia is proposing certainly would dovetail in with Israel's plan of fracturing Syria into parts, and the U.S. plan to whack off part of Syria and turn it into part of the new Kurdistan. But even if they move forward on this, all it's going to take is another false flag gas attack, and the war will be off and running again. Got to take a commercial break. We'll be back with the last segment of our program after these few words. Hello, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our program today, and I just got an interesting email in my mailbox in response to my comments about this late spring snowstorm causing a huge amount of damage to agriculture across Europe and the United States. And this person is writing from Northern California saying, as of the last trip to the market, iceberg lettuce is $2.89 each, normally 99 cents to $1.49 each. Red or green lettuce $2.99 each, normally 99 cents to $1.49 each. Napa and bok choy lettuce $1.89 a pound, normally 99 cents a pound. So we're talking basically about prices are doubling here. Romaine lettuce $2.99, normally $1.49. Cilantro 69 cents each, normally 3 for $1. Eggplant $1.79 each, normally 99 cents. Cauliflower $3.89 each, normally 99 cents to $1.49 each. This person then goes on to say that thankfully last year he'd put out planter boxes with vegetables in his backyard and is feeding himself and his family off of this. So that was a very, very smart thing to do. These are, even at that inflated price, it's still far less than we're paying here in Hawaii. But we're already seeing the prices go up. And so, gosh darn that, human-caused global warming. And again, a reminder, during the warming, the medieval and Roman warming periods, the warming was a good thing because food was growing all over the place. Humans didn't have to spend every hour of the day trying to feed themselves, and they had time left over to advance civilization, architecture, art, music. The Renaissance came out of the tail end of that warming period. And then, of course, when the Little Ice Age hit, it got really, really rough. A lot of different places. Al Gore is going to have his film out in July, the hottest time of year, and hopes you will all forget that we had another record-setting winter, because he's still out there pushing for carbon credits and carbon taxes, and you must submit to a global environmental authority. And it is all a lie and a scam. And even after all these years that I have been doing this, the sheer volume, scale, and audacity of the government's and corporate media's lies still catches me by surprise sometimes. No matter how cynical I get, I just can't keep up. So apparently, both here in the United States and in Great Britain, they're pushing for more laws against anti-Semitism, but the definitions of anti-Semitism are always skewed to include criticisms of the actions of the government of Israel. Now, Israel has always claimed that they never do anything really bad. It's only anti-Semites who criticism. Now they're trying to get that coded into law around the world. The same way they have succeeded in coding into law a prohibition against asking any questions about the Orthodox revealed history of World War II. And boy, George Orwell has to be spinning in his grave at this point. Oh, and by the way, George Orwell is also covered in Being in Time, Gilad Atzmon. Good read. I'm going to try and finish it today. There's the music. We'll be back tomorrow, Thursday, here on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Until then, share what you know with everybody that you know. Still trying to find a way out of this horrific mess that we are all in. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.